Welcome. It's the Long Coat Mafia, the internet's most hated and mafia-themed geek podcast.
Hello everyone, welcome to a brand new episode of the internet's most hated mafia-themed geek podcast, the Long Coat Mafia podcast. It is I, the show's main host and frontman, the Reverend Godfather, and as you probably guessed from the title, today is a special episode because it's our 200th episode. That's right, we have gone 200 episodes strong. That's posting weekly over the past 3.5 plus years. That's right, 3.5 plus crazy and weird and fun years. And when I first started this show, kind of almost on a dare with Big Candy, I kind of promised, I don't know if I promised verbally, but I promised you, the listener, interviews, convention panels, live events, con coverage, commentary, geek news, and a whole lot more, including creepypastas and SCP readings. Granted, the SCP readings kind of went by the wayside a little bit because they weren't really as popular for amongst you, the listeners. Plus, they were very quick to rattle off, so yeah, they went by the wayside. But every now and again, the creepypastas, or the mafia pastas, as I once called them, do kind of work their way into the show every now and again. And even though it's almost 2 years since we used one, we post up Electric Eye episodes for, just regular giggles and just, hey, we got nothing better to do, let's post up an old episode. Granted, again, it's been almost 2 years and going strong, it seems like, since we've used one, because it seemed like we used one almost every month. And as per promising, interviews and con coverage, we have done that over the past 3 years unexpectedly, in some ways. And I want to say, yes, I'll get into that when I do the thanks, live events and everything else. I promise these things to all of you, that I want to bring as much geek culture that is out there to all of you. And I want to believe, I hope you can agree, for those of you who have been listening since the beginning, that I provided that for you as much as I can, the best way I can. And for those of you I want to thank that were some way part of this show. And I do have, I must say before I give those thanks, out of the 2 years, even though Big Candy might not really agree with me, I believe there has been only one semi rerun, and that was our memorial to Conrad Brooks. I say that because even though he sadly passed away a few years ago, but I kind of recycled an interview he gave us when we pretty much first started. But still, that's beside the point. I'll leave that up to all of you to decide whether or not that particular episode is a rerun. I do suggest checking our show archives on our main site, which is thelongcoatmafia.podbean.com. But in regards to thanks, there's so many people. I have pretty much a page's worth of thanks. Earl, who's been on the show several times, and he seems to be well liked by a lot of you listeners. Don Ramirez, who I still have to put together his video and presentation that he did a few months ago, and right now he's working on a brand new documentary, and hopefully we'll get to be a part of that documentary. And of course, how can I not forget Big Candy, who kind of has guided me every so often in this experience in regards to what I've been doing right and what I've been doing wrong. He hasn't been my yes man. He's been my at most times my no man. And I mean that he's been there to tell me straight out that, hey, whether an idea is good or bad, if I'm going down the right path and doing things right. And also, even though she hasn't been part of the show in so long, I have to give her a shout out on this episode, and that's Zombie Bunny. Without her, there would have been no way that we would have had a kind of female input onto the show at times, and her laughter and input was well part of the show, and I cannot forget that. A lot of the stuff that she said, we have a couple of sound drops from her and a couple from Big Candy. I want to also thank Lloyd, who's been a part of the show a couple of times, and him also being even though one of my best friends, being again a no man, just telling me what I've been doing right, and being again one of the soundboards in regards to ideas and kind of allowing me to sort through those ideas in regards to whether they'll work or not. Who else? Let's also while I'm on this, people who came to us early on, how can I not forget Matt Burns, the one and only Matt Burns? Without this gentleman, I can't give him praise enough, because without him, almost a little more than 3 years ago, he gave us a chance with 4-State SlasherCon and allowed us to cut our teeth for the very first time at a convention, and our first convention panel. Just telling us, go do it, just do it, and allowing us to learn and improve regards to doing panels and getting a chance us to do interviews and just cutting our teeth. I cannot thank him enough, and providing us with a good sizable chunk of interviews that we've done, again, over the 3.5 years. Who else? Burn the Artist. I know he listens to the show a lot. Coming on and in essence, trolling the show with that book, My Little Pony book. How can I not forget that? And I know he's probably grinning and chuckling from that. And also, that being said, Scott from Podcast Bay. How can I not forget about him just coming on and just telling us about his show and just shooting the crap, chewing the fat and everything else. Just guests like that, and also other calling guests like Randy from Geek World Order, coming on a couple of times, even though his first time was kind of bad. The second time he's come on, it was way better, and him always giving us shout outs through Geek World Order and directing a lot of people to us, even though it doesn't seem like that, but helping the show. I can't forget that. I gotta give him a shout out. Who else? I have to give out a shout out to George Spike Reel for the wonderful intros and outros and the stuff that he's helped to allow me to put together promos. I should be marking these names off so I don't forget and to recycle the names or say them again. Who else? Nick Hunt, I don't know if he listens to this. He is an independent filmmaker. He has two things in the work. One is a documentary in regards to what would be considered the final Jason movie going into the works. He's working on getting that together, and he still has another independent film that I think he's still working on too. But he's been on the show a couple of times, once to talk about his project, and another time talking about just plain wrestling and his predictions. It was wonderful having him on the show. Who else can I thank? Let's not forget Josh from Victims and Villains. A wonderful person to be on the show, working with him on the panel this past October, the Podcast 101 panel. Again, done at 4-State Comic-Con this past October. You can find the show in our archives, which is, again, The Long Coat Mafia at, longcoatmafia.podbean.com. Plus, I'm sure you could pick it up on iTunes and Google Podcasts. And see, who else? Let's not forget, while we're talking about other podcasters, Jordan from Not So Super Dudes, who was also part of our Podcast 101 panel this past October. A wonderful gentleman, especially Josh, who cannot forget about him. And his, even though Jordan runs Not So Super Dudes, I have to give Josh a little bit of extra shout out with Victims and Villains, because he does a lot of great work promoting, I won't say not promoting suicide, but promoting suicide awareness and how to come away with that, and telling people that they have a lifeline and somebody to talk to with various, outlets like the Suicide Prevention Hotline, and a lot of the local numbers that someone can call if they have that doubt in their mind and they need somebody to talk to. Let's see who. Let's talk about recently Daniel Benoit with his talks about the Bigfoot. Wonderful things. He shared a lot of our stuff. Wonderful gentleman. We had a wonderful conversation, and recently it's been one of our best downloaded episodes in regards to the topic. At least this year, it's our highest downloaded episode. And also, that being said, I can't forget our other recent guest that we had on, and that is Mark Byrne, who directed the film that I am a part of called Bigfoot. That's Bigfoot with an exclamation mark on it. And he came on to talk about, how Amazon is kind of deleting movies, independent movies, and his process in regards to doing films. Hopefully we'll get John Johnson on soon. Please, politely, if you're so kind, please politely let John Johnson know John Johnson from Darkstone Entertainment for urging us. I'll give him a shout out for one, because he's the one that urged us to do a fan theory about his Skeleton Key universe and how it kind of links in with Plan 9. And I do urge some of you to kind of politely remind him to get back with the show, so we could have him on the show to talk about his movies, especially Darknet, which is coming out sometime this year, I think. And his career is a widespread career. He said he's done close to 200 projects, and I want to talk to him about those 200 projects, both large and small. Who else can I mention? Let's talk about Joe, who's been on the show talking about wrestling, a couple of comic news. I'm not sure if he listens or not. Who can forget Sasha, the Princess of Darkness herself, Sasha. She's going to be on later this episode to talk to us about Alita, Battle Angel, live-action Disney films, and retro gaming, and a whole lot more. So stick around and stay tuned for that. And who can also not forget about Dobbs. And that was an amazing episode, and a funny episode. I have to go back into our old laptop that's kind of finicky and trying to die. It's on its death throes. And try to find that phone call, because there are stuff, if I put up a Patreon, I want bits and pieces of that phone call and the after show as part of bonus stuff for all of you if you sign up for our Patreon, if I put one together, because it was hysterical, and it should be up there for all of you to listen to at some point. And not to mention, he provided us with the song Minimal Effort, which was made into a video, which is also on not only on our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/The Long Coat Mafia Podcast, but it is on our YouTube. Just search for the Long Coat Mafia podcast on YouTube and hit that subscribe button. And yes, I do have a few videos I got to post up, and hopefully one of them will not be dinged by copyright, the evil copyright gods on YouTube. But again, I've been trying to post up a few more videos. So far, it looks like we've been averaging, at least last year, we averaged one a week. But I hope to get a few more up this year, or increase that number this year. And I must also thank, being on the show, I don't think she listens, but I want to thank her anyhow. That's Monique Dupree. That's right, the original Gata herself. Wonderful conversation to have, and the interview was awesome. Go back in our archives. Again, that was back from this past October 4-State Comic-Con. Yeah, check it out, download it, give it a listen. It's, again, available on iTunes, or say Apple Podcasts, Google Play Podcasts. You can get it off our main site, which is, again, thelongcoatmafia.podbean.com. While I'm at it, I'm going to also thank Jesse Green for being on the show, aka Captain Decapitate, aka Captain Mongo. But again, wonderful interview. As well, telling us about his acting career and him going into wrestling and his plans to kind of grow his characters. And who can also forget, I want to thank, I don't know if she listens, I doubt it, and if all of you want to tag her, I'll probably tag her when I do the show posting, and that's Lanely Cat, for allowing us to record her cosplay panel this past October. While I'm thanking cosplayers, please go into our show archive and look up our, I think it was in 2017, one of the our 4-State coverage shows. It was a live show. We had Lady J Cosplay on that, a wonderful guest, amongst other people, including, I want to bring it up because I want to get her name correctly, and I do follow her on Instagram, so let me pause this for a second. Yeah, the cosplayer I was looking up is Kaylee Marie Cosplay on Instagram. She was a wonderful interview on that particular live show aspect, and plus we had a whole mess of interviews on that in that particular episode. So please go back in the archives and check what we did in the past. You will not regret it. Who else do I need to thank? I don't know. Again, one of those people I don't think listens, but if she does, let us know that if you listen or not. And that is the one, the owner only. I'm going to say she won the internet, and that is Joe Colton Cosplay. That's right. I want to give her a shout out on this. She was on the podcast, I want to say almost 2 years ago, promoting the G.I. Joe cosplay group she was in, and the charitable group that she's a part of that does, you heard Randy from Geek World Order mention it too in his show that was earlier this year in regards to it. And it was just a wonderful interview. She had a couple of her friends come on to talk about cosplay and the charitable works that they do with that. And the reason why I say Joe wins the internet is because last year, I'm going to probably embarrass her if she listens, but I don't think she gets embarrassed that often. Last year, she did a full face makeup for Doctor Who, and she met Peter Capaldi. It was during the same time, I think the spring 2017, or it could have been the 2018 4-State was happening, and yeah, it could. I think it was more so the spring 2018 event that she posted up a photo, and I'd say she won the internet that day with that, because it was a wonderful outfit. She did a remarkable job, and she always does a remarkable job. All the cosplayers I've spoken to have done a remarkable job with their cosplay, and that include Randy. I'm including you in on that because you do a lot of G.I. Joe cosplay, and even though you also photograph a lot of cosplayers out there too, so that. A lot of people I want to thank. Also, if he listens or occasionally listens, you can let him know that I gave him a shout out, and that is Ken Hunt. He gave a wonderful interview this past October at the 4-State Comic Con that happened back then. We had a lot of fun. Are we continuing? Yes, we are. We are going forward right now because there's a lot of great stuff to come. What's happening over the next 2, 3, 4 year? Who the heck knows? Are we going to AwesomeCon? Even though I might have said yes, it might be a no. But either way, I'm going to try to go if I can. Are we going to the spring 4-State Comic Con? I'm going to try and go to that and get some interviews if I'm able to go. I know we're set up for Matt Burns's punk rock flea market that's going to be here in the Martinsburg area this April. And yes, I'm going to be like I said, I'm going to be at that. I'm going to be set up. I'm going to try to get a few interviews there. Sin City Gamblers is going to be there, and I want to speak to them and hear their music because it's been so long, and there is a whole mess of stuff else happening. There is Daniel Benoit's Bigfoot convention that's happening this upcoming June, late June, that we're covering in Virginia. Who knows what we'll get down there? Maybe we'll record some panels. Maybe we'll record Matt Burns and Mark Byrne are doing a panel there in regards to the movie Bigfoot, which again I'm a part of. So who knows what will happen and what will go on over the next several months. What's going to happen? Maybe we'll be going to Otakon again this year. They've been approving us they approved us for the past 2 years. That to me was a shock. That was more of a shock than the folks at the Eastern Panhandle Paracon saying, hey, why don't you cover our show and we'll give you a spot to promote your show. That was a shock for, at least for me, because here was a show that prior, Otakon, I'm talking about Otakon here, that we pretty much bashed in the past, and they changed our mind to go with the whole meme. So it's been a wonderful journey. It's been a shock. I keep going back in regards to Matt Burns, and who gave us that first shock, because in my head, I had not planned on covering any convention until maybe year 2, year 3, and here he was saying, hey, we'll let you cover 4-State SlasherCon. Here's a panel, something I didn't think of that would happen until this past year, year 3. If we were still going strong in year 4, he allowed us to do this. He gave us that chance. And I give him wholehearted credit for that. And not to mention, letting us get some great interviews and everything else. And yeah, we had a few hiccups in the past and a few things that fell short, and I think kind of hurt the show because I might have promised you a lot of stuff and they just fell by the wayside. There've been interviews that people have come up and said, hey, we want to speak to you, and I've told them, let's keep in touch, and they never contacted me back, and I feel like you're missing out on that. But that's just me. The thing is, we've had a great time, and yes, I'm spending about a half an hour thanking all of you, all of you listening, those of you who shared our show on Facebook, on Twitter, liked our posts on Instagram. This has been a very interesting journey, and and not just learning, but learning how to not just redo podcasts, because the time between when me and Big Candy were doing Electric Eye and this show, the Long Coat Mafia podcast, the culture of podcasts changed greatly, and it's changing even more, especially with the algorithms on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and on YouTube. Everything has changed, and just to come this far, and even though I couldn't do it without Big Candy, Lloyd, Sasha, Dobbs, Randy, the whole list, Matt Burns, even though I couldn't have done it without them and the wonderful people I've spoken to and worked with, it is utterly and truly amazing. All of you cannot fully understand what I feel when a show just blows up out of nowhere, instead of our usual 25 people that download our show on a weekly basis, and all of a sudden it blasts off to 100, 150 downloads. Getting a message on Twitter from someone who wrote the creepypasta I read, saying, "You read my creepypasta! That's so freaking awesome!" Stuff like that is so amazing and so wonderful to hear. You guys and gals don't understand. Again, where this show is going to in the future, I don't know. Will we anger some of you? That has not happened yet. That has not happened yet. Maybe one of these days I will, and we will go viral just because I said something stupid. Or we covered a very controversial topic, and it just sparks interest. As I've kidded around with some people last year, just to think, I know this is behind the scenes. Last year we covered pretty much ghosts, even though some of the panels that we brought to you dealt with cryptozoology and cryptid type beasts. It was mostly ghost related and the paranormal. And this past last week and this upcoming June, we're covering. Not only did we talk about Bigfoot, we're covering a Bigfoot convention. Again, thank you, Daniel Benoit, who is the founder of the East Coast Bigfoot Research Organization. Maybe later this year we'll cover, if they come back to Baltimore. If not, next year we're covering aliens, folks. So who knows where this show is going to lead? We'll take it go down that path wherever it leads. Who knows? Maybe we'll have someone who's really into cars come on the show. Maybe this year we'll have somebody who's a part of a band and talk music and talk what it's like behind the scenes, like we did with Midnight Sonata, I think it was, back in the first few weeks of the show. Again, check our archive, which is our thelongcoatmafia.podbean.com for that particular episode. I think it was October, November, if not December, within those 3 months of 2015 for that particular episode. It was mostly a Big Candy doing the interview. I stepped back a little bit and took a secondary role because Big Candy knows a little bit more about music than I do, and I did a lot of follow-up questions on that interview. But have I grown a little bit with that? Quite possibly. But we'll see how this particular year goes, and hopefully I'll have Big, as always, with our 4th year anniversary. We'll have Big Candy to give us a full report in regards to what he thinks, how far we've come, and everything else, because he is the person that will tell me the truth in regards to how we've done and how we are doing. there has been a lot of stuff I want to talk about, but I want to talk about it with Big Candy in regards to everything else, and a lot of stuff is pouring in, so I'll a little bit, so I don't want to talk about it now. But as promised, I won't say as promised, but I have waiting for you a Alita Battle Angel review. That's coming up in a minute or so. Then after that, we have Sasha, the Princess of Darkness, coming on, because both of us saw day one, and as of this recording, the second week numbers are not in yet in regards to how well it has done. But when I recorded, you'll hear the numbers in regards to everything when I speak to Sasha in regards to that. And I don't want to give any second week numbers or third week numbers until probably next week, because I want those numbers to be in and see how it's doing. By then, we'll have the Asian market numbers in, and a lot of rumors are saying that particular market is going to go completely haywire, because that is what they're mostly into, is the anime area of the world. So we'll see that even, and there's been more and more coverage coming about on the Geek side about Battle Angel, but you'll hear kind of some of that, and probably some of that in the call with Sasha. So I'm going to step back. I'm going to. I spent way too long giving thanks and remembering everything that has happened over the past 3+ years, especially the few of the special episodes that we've put out. The International Podcast Day episode. One particular day I got off my 9 to 5 and early that day, and someone was promoting a book in a local coffee shop. I snagged an interview with him and put it up for all of you to listen to that day. There's been other stuff. Like I said, I cannot forget about Zombie Bunny. Her just losing control, laughing at something stupid that either me or Big Candy said, or her initial quote on our first official episode saying, "I'm a gamer, I'm wearing a bikini," which has been our most famous quote. I have one or two sound drops from Big Candy too. I think he's heard them in the past, but I've been saving them. But still, I'm going to again stop and say, and provide you with that the day one review of Alita Battle Angel, my thoughts and everything else. So here it is. Hey all, just got back from watching Alita Battle Angel, or if you're an old school fan of the manga and the original 2-episode anime like I am, you keep reverting to Battle Angel Alita. And before I begin, let me just give you the two different scores. One as a fan, an old school diehard fan, and the other as a independent, or stepping back and not being a fan score. As a fan, I give this a very strong 6.5 out of 10. And that's because it kind of, like most things that are adapted by either a comic book or in this case a manga / anime, it doesn't really translate well. You have to kind of trim a lot of things and try to explain and adapt a lot of the stuff that it was initially part of the source material into it. But that's the nitpick we'll get into in a few minutes. But as per the independent setting the whole fan and the old school want to nitpick about everything aside, I want to give it a very strong 7.5 with a soft 8. So either way, I do recommend you going to see this. It's a very wonderful film. All the actors and actresses that portrayed a part in this film did a wonderful job. James Cameron did a wonderful job trying to mix the story well. I want to say that before we get into everything as a fan trying to nitpick everything, I want to say he did a very good job trying to intermingle at least the first 3 volumes of this. It was strictly heavy based on the first volume of the manga and a little bit of volume 2 and volume 3 sprinkled in. The actors and the actresses played a wonderful part. The people they got for Nova, who was Ed Norton of all people, fit the part. And his sunglasses or his the stuff that he wears, the item he wears over his eyes, looked beautiful, looked spot on. Makes me want to, I want to buy that prop. Or buy a replica of that. The person that they got to play Vector fit it perfectly, played it perfectly. The person that they played Ito, even though I'm going to nitpick a little bit about this, that Ito seemed, at least in the manga and the anime, was a lot younger, but in this it fit very well. It fit very, very well. The person who played Alita or Gon, or depending on what source material you follow, in this case Alita, again, spot on. They did the best they could with this, and I do recommend going to see it. It was very campy in spots and very slow. And even though this was originally supposed to be, or originally was, a cyberpunk type manga, they made it a little bit more romance heavy and cheesy in spots. But when the action decides to ramp up, it is great. And there are some parts in here that I was surprised about, but they didn't really push in a lot of the stuff that was surrounding this movie. And meaning that what I saw is that they were kind of very accepting of they didn't bring it up in the manga that I remember, because it's been a long time since I've seen the anime or read the original manga run of this. But I will say this, what they did was, I'm going to say, there was an admiration to differences and having prosthetics. It's something you don't see, because in today's climate, it's all about, X, Y, and Z, or empowering X, Y, and Z, but this is embracing a difference, but it didn't rely on that, meaning that this is not really spoiling anything, is that when Alita finally leaves the building of where Doc Ito has repaired her, and she bumps into the next supporting character, which is Hugo. He looks at her hand and holds it up, and he's very accepting. And was like, "This is wonderful work. This is, you should be proud of this. Who did this? Doc Ito?" And she's like, "Yes, he's the one that fixed me and made this body." And he's like, "Well, he does wonderful work. You should be happy. You should be proud of yourself." And he's just not putting her down. He is more supportive of her. I like that aspect. Yes, this is again, as you've heard me and Big Candy say, not me more so than Big Candy, this was a very obscure manga back then, and this is a very obscure manga to make a live action movie on, and it does well. Now for the little bit of the nitpick, and to bring up some of the go back into a fandom, because I want to go into it. And let me say this, I want to say the initial run of manga, or say Battle Angel Alita, came out roughly 20 years ago, because I think I spotted 1 or 2 issues on stands when I was living in Florida back in 95, early 96. And so it must have been just winding down at that point, meaning here in the States, volume 7 or 8 at that time. And when I finally started collecting the manga, but I will say this, I saw the anime in roughly 1997, early 1997. I picked it up here in, I would say here, but in Winchester, watching it in the apartment that I was renting with my folks. So I remember watching it there, and if not there in Florida, I want to say I saw it here at least in Winchester, but it was a wonderful anime, and remembering that got me into collecting the manga series. And here in the States, let me state this: nowadays, if you went to Barnes and Noble or any place that sells manga like Naruto or Attack on Titans or whomever you're currently buying or following as a manga series or ongoing manga series, those are the standards. Those are pretty much par for par. If you found them, if you went to Japan, those are the mangas you'd see. That's the style. That's the format. But when I was collecting the Battle Angel comics or manga, it was here in the States. The issues that were here in the States were in comic book form, the same style as Spider-Man, Superman, The Walking Dead in the initial release. They were not in the atypical manga form as we know now. But I'm willing to say in Japan they were in the same style as we are now familiar with in Japan. And here in the States, it was a 9-volume run, and in Japan, it was a 10-volume run. I think due to importing and everything else, it was adjusted to 9 volumes here in the States and how it was released here in the States. But the nitpick is there's a lot of differences. Like I said, James Cameron, I think, helped co-wrote this movie. If not, he did wrote it completely. And the thing is, that's where the adjustments come in. Because a lot of the original manga and comic was violent heavy, heavy on the R, maybe close to what NC-17 is today. And the fun thing, I wouldn't say the fun thing is, like one of the major things that was cut out or replaced in the movie was Motorball. We didn't see, the fans of the original comic or manga, I have to adjust that, or you'll hear me keep saying that, because it was in essence a comic here in the States, not a manga here in the States. We didn't see Motorball here in the States or in the manga until Volume 2. And the reason why is because of what happens to Hugo in Volume 1. Yes, something happens to Hugo in Volume 1, which in her, with what happened, she goes to Motorball. It's kind of referenced and brought up as a way for her to make additional money, and she is what's known as a hunter-killer or a bounty hunter in the movie and the manga and in the anime. But the thing is, the reason why she is a bounty hunter slash a hunter-killer is because she wants to help Hugo earn money. And that's why she becomes a bounty, this awesome, badass bounty hunter, which is only touched on for maybe about 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And in the manga, in the anime, it's brought up in regards to that's how she earns money. But because it's too violent and not really PG-13 worthy, Hugo convinces her to do motorball and to earn cash that way. And as stated, but even though it's kind of brought up and it's only touched on, one of the other things that is shown, and I like the I won't say physical because CGI is obviously used, and that is the aspect of the sea whatever robots. The reason why I say that is because in the anime and the manga, it's these, they seem a little bit taller in the manga and in the anime, but it's like here in the live action movie, they may be about 2 foot tall, and maybe about 1.5 foot round. But in the manga and the anime, they're more closer to 3 feet, maybe 3.5 feet, and a little way wider. As these goofy little robots are just cylinder, and they're helpful. They're part of the Salem or Tiferaries. I'm probably butchering that name. The anime and the movie has one name, and the book has something completely different. I have no issue with that. But the reason why I say the C series is because these little pillar robots are just random numbers, meaning that the one you see in the manga and the anime, it's C-01, and some instances where they have these helper robots or these movies, these robots based on from Salem / I'll say Salem because that's what's used kind of in the book and anime, and I think the movie as well. But they're just there as representations of the computer system for it. So the other thing is one of the things that they kind of do. Victor, to kind of spoiler alert in regards to this, Victor runs a lot. He has his fingers in a lot of stuff. He's a crime boss. He's a just a cold-hearted bastard. And he's a scammer. He's a little bit of everything. He runs a lot of major stuff here on Earth. And Salem is a floating city. Let me put it like that. It is by science plausible and can be done. And the business he runs, he is like an import-export business. What he does is helps take a lot of the trash that Tipperary / Salem dumps out, redoes it, recycles it, reforms it, and takes a lot of the stuff that we produce here on Earth and ships it back up. The better stuff, meaning if you want the Cristal type champagne and wine and the high-end wine and champagne, we can't have it, but that's the stuff that gets shipped up to as supplies for this floating city. And one of the things that he promises and scams people here on Earth is that, I could help you get up there. Even though up there, you'll be a poor person and a nobody. Down here, the money you could require you to pay your way up there through my services, you could be a king. But, and that's how he kind of scams people to go up there. The thing is, little do they realize, again, spoilers, is that the way you can't physically go up there, meaning the residents like Ito, Nova, and Siren or Sharon is pronounced. It sounds close to Sharon in the movie. They're all people from this floating city that were in the manga are outcasts. Literally, they're outcasts, or they're ones that somehow get ejected from the city, meaning that they've done a great wrong in the city, so they exile them to Earth with no way to to return. And there's no, literally, by law, you can't, at least in the book, the anime, and the movie, there is no way, it's illegal for you to, there is no way to go to this floating city. It's a promise, it's a scam. They mention it in Rollerball, and that's completely untrue. In Motorball, in the movie, that you could win your way up there. No, that's not true. There is no way, at least in the manga and the anime, going up there, there's no way. And Victor's scam is because there's a lot of things that down here on Earth that is required in the city. He promises, quote unquote, promises, this, you could go up there and you'll be at least a resident up there. What in reality happens is he kills you, dissects you, and ships your parts, you as parts, for the people living in the city. Meaning, hey, we need kidneys up here. Pretty much that's what he does. It's all black market body replacements for the residents in the city. And that's makes him this scammer and this kind of evil person. Now, in regards to Nova, in the movie, he's this like puppet master, and for the movie aspects of the movie, it works. I have no problem with that. And again, Ed Norton does a great job. But the thing about this is, in the manga, he doesn't come into play until, again, book 3, and just that he's somehow this evil mastermind genius, and he has to be stopped. And he's I forgot in regards to the manga, in regards to why he needs to be stopped. Just that he's evil, mayhem. He wants everything to kind of come down. And one of the things I want to bring up in regards to the movie is that I think even though a lot of the stuff that you see in the movie is mentioned in the books already, at least the Battle Angel Alita books, because there are 2 sets of series. One is Battle Angel Alita, or Battle Angel Gun, or Battle Angel Alita. That's one set. That's 1 through 10. And Battle Angel Last Order. Last Order is kind of a parallel story to Battle Angel, the original set. I think it takes place roughly prior to Book 8. I think where Last Order takes place is roughly when starts the branch off, if you were reading the manga, from 8 on. So there's that. It's a little bit confusing when you read Last Order right after the initial run. But it looks like James Cameron read a little bit of Last Order and kind of mixed in that little bit of that, not too much, just a very little bit in regards to the storyline for this. And the other nitpicks is that in the manga, now all people sent from the city, the floating city, to Earth are given a mark to show on their forehead to show that they are from the city and they're outcast. Ito in the movie does not have this mark. He says he removed it, but in the manga and the anime, he still has that mark. And the other thing is like, let's see here. I'm looking at my notes. Ito was the one that found the Berserker body. He's the one that found it, not Alita herself. But in this, it kind of fits. I want to say that. It's not too heavy. Like I said, the incorporation of Last Order a tad, it does work. And what kind of irked me a little bit with the bounty hunter / hunter killers, because there's no cops in Iron City or in the city, the floating city, which manages this city underneath that city, kind of allows it, meaning if you're a killer or somebody that's really wanted, they just put a bounty on your head and allow these bounty hunters / hunter killers to go after you. And the thing is, if you want to be a bounty hunter, all you have to do is to register. You go in, you say you want to register, and boom, you're given in essence a little bit of a license to do this. But in the manga and the anime, they don't do that. They pretty much put a type of barcode, like a barcode tattoo on your brain, or imprint a barcode in your brain, because according to the C unit, or the C01 unit robot, says that anything can here on Earth can be fabricated. Voice imprints, eyes, or either replaced or replaced with cybernetic parts, or be faked, meaning or somehow replaced. But you cannot replace a brain. You need a brain to survive. So that's where they put this barcode. You could, meaning if you lose that ID, that license, anybody could claim that you're you and get that bounty. Now, the thing is, whether or not they kind of, I guess it was more reliable or more sensible to have kind of a license or card carrying aspect of things is great. I understand that. But it's a nitpick. And let's see what else. Again, we kind of talked about Alita becoming a bounty hunter to help Hugo in the manga. Her Damascus blade, I forgot how she gets it in the manga, but in the manga it becomes, again, part of her motorball outfit, her uniform. They do go into in regards to 99. There's a lot of stuff I'm forgetting. I have to go back to my storage unit. It's kind of hard to bring 9 volumes of manga back to my little place, the safe house, because it takes up pretty much a long box. But in the manga, it becomes like I just remember it being closer to a butterfly knife, a very large butterfly knife. So it might have started out as a sword and later becomes a butterfly knife / sword. It's very large, and but overall it's similar. It's just, again, a nitpick in regards to that, and it does initially become part, again, like I said, her uniform. A lot of it was a comic, or say manga accurate. Let's see here. The defense ring, the floating city does have defense rings on the transport tubes that go to and that are attached to it. But you see a flashback to in one of the parts of the movie that they're taking down one of these floating cities, and well, they kind of get attacked by the defense rings. That was not... They are in the manga and the anime, just that they weren't really part of that backstory at all. But I haven't really read a lot of the Last Order in regards to some things. So hopefully I'll pick up one of these days, or go through eBay or Amazon and pick up a lot of the if there's omnibuses for the original run of Battle Angel. I'll pick up 1 or 2 so I can reread them. And I know I have 2 omnibuses for Last Order. There's a hell of a lot more that's after this that I want to pick up and read, because again, but overall I want to say this. They show Alita being a badass? Yes, they do. And because this is a PG-13 film, you're only allowed 1 F-bomb, and she's the one that delivers it beautifully, perfectly. It's the best. And there's a lot of instances in this where you'd think the theater was like, oh shit, she really does kick ass, and it does fit, it works, it's very wonderful. Again, I do recommend it, and I spent close to a half hour in regards to ranting about this and nitpicking a little bit. So, and maybe I'll decide on a few things later. But I hope you enjoyed this little nitpick / review, and back to our program.
The Long Coat Mafia will be right back.
Welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that review of Alita Battle Angel and the history behind it, which includes the original manga. I know I probably rambled on a little bit longer than I should have, but I wanted to get out everything because I was a little bit kind of stoked and maybe a little bit miffed as a fanboy. But up next is our Skype call with the Princess of Darkness herself, Sasha, and her links will be in the usual spot in the show description. So, and again, you'll hear me rehashing a little bit of what you just heard in my review in the Skype call with her, because, well, she saw it pretty much the same day I did where she lives at in Pennsylvania. So, enough with me prattling on in regards to what the Skype call is, to kind of paraphrase Philip DeFranco a little bit, and let's just jump right into it. And here's the Skype call. Okay, folks, we have somebody on this episode that hasn't been on in a long while, at least when it comes to our show. I think last time we were on a broadcast of hers, it was maybe almost a year ago. It might be a little bit sooner, because at least on my computer it says May of last year. And that is Sasha, the Princess of Darkness. Welcome back. So, say hello to the nice people on the other side of the screen.
Hello. If you guys haven't had a chance, go watch out my titty review. It's up there on YouTube right now.
And
shameless plug.
Links to her YouTube channel will be in the show description as usual, like we do every guest that we have on the show. And the reason why she is on this week's program is because within the past 24 to 48 hours, she saw the same thing I did in theaters. And now, despite the fact that this being week one, I will have to say that in the long run, we will have to wait out the results, and it'll be interesting to see how it falls. And depending on when this episode drops, we will put an update at the end of everything to let all of you listeners know what exactly is going on. And that is, the movie is Alita Battle Angel, or Battle Angel Alita to us old school fans. I know some of you out there are kind of sick and tired of at least me talking about this movie, but and a lot of you probably just heard my solo review, and I want to get what Sasha thinks about this movie, because she's just about an old school fan of this manga / anime as I am. So take it away.
All right. Well, I want to preface this with, everybody knows my feelings about the Ghost in the Shell remake. I wasn't a fan of the live action reboot of that, because just something was missing. And then when it came to Death Note, yeah, they made some changes. Yes, it was tolerable, and that's a more newer anime. It was, how can I put it best? It was acceptable. I'm not saying that I liked it, but I'm not saying that I entirely hated what they did with it. I'm curious as to how the sequel will play out on Netflix. But lately, when it comes to live action adaptations of anime, it's been interesting, and I think you can kind of agree with me on that. It's hit or miss, and with talks of, I think there's a live action Cowboy Bebop coming, and we still have what's his name? Something Tahati, whoever did Thor Ragnarok. He's getting ready to do the Akira live action. So I'm just curious on how that's going to all turn out. But lately, and again, this is my 2 cents, it's been hit or miss on any sort of live action adaptation of anything that came from Asia that's anime.
Yeah, but what do you think of this this particular movie that seemed, I want to say it's almost singly dividing a lot of audiences out there as of right now?
Here's what tickled me, and this is just me talking. I love Guillermo del Toro. Anybody can read my feed. Anytime Guillermo's got something new out there, I'm all about it, because Guillermo's got a unique touch to it. Also a big fan of Robert Rodriguez. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, the guy can do no wrong. I mean, you had El Mariachi, you had The Faculty, you had, Machete. He does a lot of very gritty, unique takes, and even though he seems to act like he's on a budget, he kind of feels like a throwback to the old Corman days where he could take a small budget and make it look good. And then the fact that Cameron was involved with this, I mean, it was the perfect fusion. For me, having experienced the early issues of the manga as well as seeing the original OVA back in the 90s when it came out, it was very true to the source material. I'll be frank, the OVA, a lot of people have fond memories of it because we all rented it at Blockbuster Video. If you say that you didn't, you're full of crap. Everybody rented it at Blockbuster Video at some point in their life.
Let me just say this. I know a lot of you heard my single solo review, and I want to say this. Sasha might actually laugh about this, because when I picked up the original run of Battle Angel, it wasn't in the atypical style we know now when it comes to manga. It was literally in comic book form. That's how I got it. It looked like your standard issue of comic book. Like volume 1, if you picked up book 1 of any manga that's out there, Attack on Titan, Naruto, or God forbid, Pokemon. It's maybe about I want to say a book that's about a half-inch thick. But here in the States, back when it was I think released, it was in comic book form. So that book 1 was maybe about 12 to 20 issues long, and it was 23 pages long, and you had 9 volumes here in the States. Again, 9 volumes here in the States, and 10 volumes in, I think, where it was originally done, I think, in Japan. So, just that, I think here in the States, for the aspect of the context, one of the volumes here, when it was released in the States, it was, I think, either 7 and 8 was combined, or 8 and 9 was combined for that one particular volume here in the States, and it was the ninth, quote-unquote, 9th volume or 9th book, or what have you. I know folks, it seems confusing. That's how it was. That's the weirdness that is anime when it comes over, or I think it's still, I want to say it still happens with anime when it comes here to the States. It's kind of changed in some ways sometimes. So.
Right, and with this, I mean, for me, I like it because it's got a bunch of my favorite creators involved with it. It did have a very interesting visual style to it. I originally thought from the trailers it was going to be bothered by the big eyes and her big old head, but let's be honest, in the manga, that's how it was. The whole chibi kind of design. But it's interesting because I know a lot of people who are watching this, they didn't know about the manga. In fact, interesting side story, and it being the 90s when this originally came out, I didn't have access to the internet until like the upper end of the 90s. Like I had to go to the library or the university to get my hands on internet access. I was just a poor white kid. Nobody loved me.
For me, when I first saw the manga, I think, again, I'm discussing things with Sasha. I know a lot of you heard our solo review, which aired prior to this. It's that when I first laid my hands on anything Battle Angel, it was the 2-episode anime, and I think I picked it up either when I was living here in Virginia or when I was still living in Florida. It was on VHS at a local equivalent of a Suncoast. I don't think it was even labeled as a Suncoast. It was nothing but videos at the time. They didn't have any DVDs. They were transferring everything over. When DVDs were starting to come into play, they were gradually bringing in DVDs. And as you probably know, back in those days, whereas DVDs were still maybe about $20, $30, animes were still another $10, $15 on top of that.
Right. And what I think kind of threw me off, and this is why I didn't look that further into it, going back to the whole internet thing, is you know how it is back in high school and college. You have a group of friends and you all hang out and you all talk about what you know about the anime, because information was kind of limited. And my friends had told me, oh, well, the reason why the OVA felt truncated is because the creator died. And I was like, something there just didn't sit right, but I left it alone. You know what I mean? I didn't look any further. And then later in life, I found out, oh my goodness, there's a whole series behind this. I'm like, why was the ending truncated? You know what I mean? And then I had read the manga, and then I saw how much more in-depth the story got. Because I don't know if you remember the anime, if you've had a chance to watch it, but like the whole situation with Hugo in the anime
spoilers
is really...
folks. Go ahead.
Well, I'm not going to go into spoilers, but it's more truncated as to why he's doing what he's doing.
Right.
It's more truncated. It doesn't go into his whole family and the issues with his mother and his father, because if you read the manga, it goes into detail as to exactly what happened between his mother and his father, and it just kind of shows how dark and twisted the world that they comes from, whereas in the anime, it's just kind of on you. And yes, there's still an emotional punch to it. I'm not saying that the movie brought more of those elements back into it, but it still had a bit more emotional gravitas than I would say the original OVA did. And the movie itself seems more aimed toward a more faithful adaptation to the manga. Don't get me wrong, they did change some things, but it's definitely a lot better than it was in the OVA.
I want to say, as a lot of you heard in my earlier review, let me just say that so I don't keep repeating myself on it, listeners. I'm just going things over with Sasha. What I noticed is that even though there was a lot of Volume 2 in this current movie, and Volume 3 in this movie touches on it, I don't know if you've read any part of Last Order, but there seem to be touches of Last Order in this as well in regards to Alita's backstory. Right.
And it goes into a little bit of that. Now, I'm kind of excited to see because right now it's set as the big winner for the weekend for movies, because I think right now it has made at least a Forbes about $50 million this weekend so far.
Yes, the domestic 3-day gross, according to Box Office Mojo, was $27 million, but the 4-day gross was $47 million.
Yep. So it's definitely getting up there. And keep in mind, I don't even think this is released outside of the U.S. yet. Because right now,
next up is China and Asia. So, and a lot of the folks are, I don't know if you agree with it or not, at least Grace from her channel, YouTube channel, has stated that because of the extended markets, she's expecting that's where it's going to get most of its money and possibly break even. I want to reiterate this because there was an article I shared today on my Facebook page saying that it's granted this movie hasn't made it totally past the 4-day weekend yet, and they're saying this movie is already a bomb here throughout. They're saying it's a bomb. Because, again, folks, as we've been saying for the past at least couple of weeks, there have been many, many folks, at least on the professional side of things, dissing this movie. And meaning that if you look on, like it or hate them, Rotten Tomatoes, this movie, Alita Battle Angel, has like a 30% Rotten Tomato, 30% rating from the professionals, and a 92% from watcher base. So,
Right, and let's be frank, when it comes to a movie like this, it's not made for the critics. It's not. It's not some sort of Oscar sentimental piece. I mean, we're talking about Robert Rodriguez behind the camera, for Christ's sakes. You know, he made the Planet Terror segment for Grindhouse. Again, Faculty. I could go on and on with Rodriguez because he's made a ton of good movies, but how many of them do you see are actually ever going to win an Oscar spotlight? They're not. Are they structurally well paced and brilliantly done? Yes, but at the end of the day, they're the stuff that you and I grew up with seeing at the local actual Grindhouse and enjoying on video or seeing at the mom and pop theater. You know what I mean? They're not the ones that we're ever going to see somebody talk finely of. Look at the response that, and granted, you probably don't like it. I loved it, but look at the response The Predator got. Like, critics hated that movie. I loved it. It was fun. It was dumb fun. And I'm not saying that Alita's dumb fun, because there's a lot to this story, and there's a lot of complex levels. But I just see it as, you know, the critics going, oh, it's a sci-fi actioner. Woo. You know?
For you to go into a little bit more depth, I know you probably do this on your own channel in due time, but what do you think about the people playing the individual characters in regards to this particular movie?
Well, it was interesting because I was concerned with a lot of Rosa, who plays Alita's, with the computer animation effects to kind of overexpress her features. I was worried that her character wouldn't show through, and it did. It did kind of show that childlike element while still being a warrior at heart. Christopher Waltz, who plays Dyson Ito, the scientist who kind of helps resurrect her, was brilliant. I mean, you got Jennifer Connelly in this.
Yeah,
you know,
one of the things I think when I did my review, I got into the fan-based nitpicks that I personally had. I said, okay, this is just going to be for this. I said my first nitpick that I'm going to leak into my quasi-professional review is that Waltz's portrayal of Dr. Ito is that in the anime and the manga, he seems more, the character is more closer to in his late 20s, early 30s, where Christopher is way older than that, but still he does a wonderful job portraying Ito. So it was like there was a balance with that. He still got wonderful performance out of him, and even though he's way older than the character should have been.
And I think that was kind of necessary because, let's be honest, in the OVA, with like the relationship between Ito and Alita, it was kind of creepy. You know what I mean? Where there's that whole scene where they're walking down the steps, and he's like, no, you just need to stay in the background and be cute. And it's like, you consider yourself her father, or do you look at her more of your wafu? I mean, what's going on?
I think in the comic, I should say the manga, folks, again, the reason why I keep saying comic instead of manga is because, to me, when it was initially released in the States, it looked like a comic, a legit American-style comic. But in the manga, she does deliver that line saying, I am not your doll. I am, she literally says, I'm not your doll, I'm not your toy. I have this personality, I want to do more, I want to be such.
Yes. And that was something I felt that the OVA, the anime, the cartoon, kind of, how can I put it best, kind of sidestepped and kind of made creepy as opposed to the impact of the comic. And I think that's why they went with somebody a little older to play Ito. Yeah. So he did have that more father-like.
Yeah, that's why what I like. It's one of those subtle changes I don't mind, is that instead of it being this creepy, even though Ito might have been a father figure in the anime and the manga, but again, as you said, there was more of a creepy factor to it. But in this case, it's that subtle change that fit. It's like, okay, we're going to send this creepy factor. Let's exchange it to a father figure.
Yes.
So that's even I'll admit that's an adjustable change to it. But I did enjoy. As stated, I did enjoy everybody's performance in this. I think they did a wonderful job portraying the characters that they they won, if you want to use that term, or they were hired on to portray.
Yeah, and I mean, they have a good cast. I mean, you've got Jackie Earle Haley. He plays kind of like the big cyberpunk Grishka. Then you have, George Lindenberg Jr. You would have saw him in Bumblebee. I'm really intrigued as to the type of character he can play. He can play this a doofy little sidekick character in a Transformers movie, and then kind of this downtrodden, thieving-esque, almost villainous, but does have a redeeming moment in the film character Tanji. And I was like, wow, that's neat. I can't wait to see more from this kid. Jeff Fahey was in this, Derek frickin' Mears, Michelle Rodriguez is in here. I don't like her as much, but
I didn't notice her.
Yeah, there was two different roles that she did. There was one of the racers in there that she played, and then she also played Claymore. She played two different parts.
Okay. I know Ed Norton was almost spot on for Nova.
Yes.
Oh, and that was one of my. I didn't know he was going to be this, or wasn't really familiar that Nova was going to be a part of this movie. And as I stated, at least in my video, he was spot on, and I like how they did the apparatus that he has on the face. I thought it was a wonderful job and almost dead on to how it looks in the manga. And
I'm probably going to butcher the first name, but I'll just use the last name. But Ali, who played Vector was spot on too.
Yeah, that even I said the same thing. It's like, yeah, my I'm not touching the first name, but his last name is Ali, and he was very spot on in regards to it. I think
and Jennifer Connelly, she made a great Sharon. I mean, granted, she wasn't a blonde, but it was interesting. And I mean, the Ali guy, I mean, he's even got like a decent history behind him. I mean, he was in the Curious Case of Benjamin Button. He's currently in House of Cards. He was in the Green Book just recently in Luke Cage. I mean, this film honestly has an actor pedigree to it. It's pulp sci-fi. I mean, I was getting a lot of Blade Runner vibes from it and other sci-fi, you can automatically think of off the top of your head. But it's decently acted and well performed, and I just think the critics are going, oh, this is just some off-the-wall sci-fi, and because it doesn't have like a Disney backing it or isn't part of some major franchise at the moment, they're kind of turning their nose up to it. And I'm like, you don't need to look at it that way. You want to go and see a movie. Now, I wouldn't say it's an original IP because it's something that you and I have seen in other formats, but it's nice to finally see a live action adaptation that I personally feel is worthwhile.
Right. Now, I know at least I touched on, it's like we brought up briefly that in regards to that this movie could possibly bomb in the States. You got overseas numbers could either save it or make it a success overall, but we won't know until much later over the next few weeks. And as stated, I shared a posting from comicbook.com. I want to share with you with not just what I stated on as the under my personal account, but the replies in essence I got from it is because again, I stated that the article was clickbait and stupid. Numbers are just numbers for the States. We won't know until if it's official bomb until the foreign numbers come in and see how they treat things, because sometimes they make things a success, sometimes they help the movie at least break even. And one of the arguments, or at least reasons I've seen in this the replies or in the comment section of this article was that I'm not going to see this because the eyes are creepy, or the statement was, I'm not going to see this movie because of the eyes. I don't like the eyes. And my initial reply to this was like, I take it that's why probably you don't read the manga or watch anime. Besides, get over it. It's a sci-fi movie for the most part. That was my response. It's a sci-fi movie. People don't have to look like people in sci-fi.
Exactly.
And the reply I got back might have been the initial commenter saying that in regards to what, because the commenter was female, and the person that replied was female, at least to my comment, stated that the eyes are creepy or hell. I don't like anime because of 8-year-old girls with big boobs. The horrible acting voices don't help at all. Now, before you lunge into this, let me share with you my response to her, is that I've watched anime over the years, and through the years, one, the girls are in their early to late teens, and like most girls in real life, have been represented in all sizes. Two, this is why most anime fans prefer subbed over dubbed. Three, good chance I can make the same arguments about cartoons aired here in the States as you just did about anime. Four, to me, the eyes are creepy argument is stupid and irrational, and pretty much like me saying I refuse to see a movie because it has a dog in it or somebody sneezed in the trailer. Lastly, 5, I'm willing to say you never saw Avatar for the same reason, and stated in my initial post, this is a sci-fi movie, not a watered-down horror movie. Move past it. See it in an early showing, and if you're so creeped out over the eyes, look at something else on screen or do what everyone else does now in theaters. Either look at their phones or talk loudly as possible. And she didn't reply to me after that. But another person did, to kind of get the facts in regards to that. Domestic is one of the factors. And we kind of agreed on a lot of the points, stating that that overseas sometimes helps break things even. Sometimes they still flop. But and I agree with him. It's like we have to wait until cards fall over the next few weeks. And one of the things he agreed with me is that that this is not just a rarity. You know, right now anime movies are like superhero movies in the early 2000s and maybe in the late 90s. They're not really known. They're not big. They're not a big thing. And not to mention, Alita is a very obscure comic and a very, very obscure anime. Not many people are familiar with it because, again, we know Pokemon. You say Pokemon, everybody knows about Pokemon. You say Yu-Gi-Oh, yeah, people know about, or at least knew about Yu-Gi-Oh. You mentioned Dragon Ball Z, people might know about Dragon Ball Z. But you mentioned Alita, Battle Angel Alita, they're like, huh, what, where, when? So that's why this one of the things that could hurt it, and it's one thing he agreed with me on that. So,
well, this is the thing with anime and manga in general. I consider myself not an otaku, but an old taku, because granted, I kind of grew up, you know, in the late 70s, early 80s, when we were starting to get, like, import shows in, like, rebranded for American audiences, like, you know, Go Lion becoming Voltron, and, what was the one with the guy who looked like a pirate, and there was a weird, like, transforming, like, battleship in space?
It was Captain something.
Yes, there was
Captain
that one.
Hargo, Captain...
Yes.
Something along those lines.
Yeah,
I remember seeing Voltron. I remember seeing that one particular anime, the Captain one. I remember seeing... I remember getting up early because it aired as I don't know if it aired during the week, but I remember getting up extra early on Saturdays, like 6 a.m. early instead of 7 a.m. to watch it. It was, I think, Gundam. Watching it back in the early 80s. But I didn't really get into anime until the mid-90s when I watched Akira on TNT. And when I was talking about it at work to one of the guys at a local mall, he said, oh, they cut out a whole mess of stuff. Tomorrow, he said, are you working tomorrow? I went, yeah. He said, well, I'm going to loan you one of my tapes. And it was that. It was also Vampire Hunter D. And I wish that that time there was YouTube and recording my initial reactions of watching both Vampire Hunter D and the what would be the uncut, uncensored version of Akira for the first time. Because it would have been priceless.
I was lucky having grown up an Army brat because we had access to cable fairly early. And we had stuff like that, like G-Force would be running on like cable channels that you could access. I don't know if you remember G-Force, those guys who dressed in the weird bird-like pajamas and had their weird. Okay. And then there was some other animes, like movies, like Lensman. I don't know if you remember Lensman or not, where they had like that weird superpowered lens in their hand. It kind of reminded you of Green Lantern or whatever, but they were like galactic peacekeepers. It's an interesting.
Remember.
It's an interesting, like, sci-fi length movie that's all animated, and they used to run the hell out of that, like, early morning, late nights on Showtime and Skinamax. Granted, this wasn't anime like, you're thinking like hentai, but it was anime early in the morning, and they're like, well, we ain't got anything else to stick on, let's stick this dubbed movie in there. Then there was the one with that weird-ass cat. It was kind of like a mix of The Thing meets Alien. And these people, and it was really cool because they had this concept of these people like looking for another Earth to kind of like do the resources. So there was these people they called time jumpers who, to escape their crimes, they'd assume a new identity and hide aboard a spacecraft for like the hypersleep, because by the time they woke up, like 30, 40 years would have passed and everybody would have forgotten about their crimes, so clean slate. Which was an interesting concept, and I wish they would have did more with it in the movie. But then it devolves into like this weird virus thing that the ship picks up that's killing everybody and can look like anybody. And there's this weird robot cat, and it was like something that was early '80s, and yeah, it was like clearly an Alien meets The Thing ripoff, but in Japanese anime. If I can figure out the name, I'll have to get you that. But it was interesting, and this stuff would show up on Cinemax, show up on Showtime early in the morning, things of that nature, because they're like, well, fuck, we can't put any more fuck flicks up. We can put maybe like a cartoon with a little bit of violence on it, just on the off chance that some parents flipping through and their kid might be watching. But yeah, there was all kinds of different stuff like that. And I always call it kind of like the early days of anime, because you gotta understand, over here in the States, back in the 80s and the 70s, we looked at animation as kid stuff.
Right.
In Japan, it wasn't kid stuff. Like, they literally had some adult content. And yes, you can argue, like, early Warner Brothers stuff, early, what was his name? Fleischer, guy who did Felix the Cat and Popeye and whatnot. Fleshman or Fleischer, I can't remember, one of the two. But they had some adult themes in it, but they didn't go overboard. Whereas in Japan, hey, we can animate this and do whatever the hell we want and have a serious storyline. And it's interesting because, like, from the 70s to the 90s, that's how anime was. I mean, it was sci-fi, action, horror. There was even some sex and drama in it. I mean, you remember watching Macross. It was a soap opera with robots in fucking space.
For me, I don't think I've seen motocross as a kid. Just that I might have come across maybe Cowboy Bebop as a kid, but I don't remember.
Mm-hmm.
But as I just know, for the most of the 80s, when I was living in New York and then Pennsylvania, we were primarily a HBO family. We weren't a Skinamax or a Showtime. But I don't remember seeing any real big anime films back then until, again, the mid-90s, watching Akira on TNT, when they were trying to have that, get into it, or that little bit of a block to it. And I was like, okay, this is something I got to pay attention to. And roughly about that same time, as you know, Pokemon was starting to get big, so was Yu-Gi-Oh! And Digimon, and I want to say the lower level stuff started to hit big here in the States because it was way kid friendly. Even though most folks at home, all they do is search on YouTube about Pokemon censored and Yu-Gi-Oh! Censored to get the full story. So,
well, for me, like, the best way I can describe it is I remember, and I was either 9 or 10 when this happened. And it was interesting because I remember, because I played NES a lot. I mean, what kid during the late 80s and 90s didn't play the Nintendo Entertainment System a lot? Right. A lot of the games that we got over here, granted, they changed some things around, but they were based on popular anime. Like, I can't think of the name of it, but it was a Dragon Ball game that was on Nintendo. And it just had a very thin paint over it. But once you've seen Dragon Ball, you're like, wait a minute, this is an NES game based on Dragon Ball. I remember, and I want to say it was like the late 80s, and I was flipping through upper cable channels, and I saw this anime of this guy in a leather jacket just like exploding people's heads with his fist, which wound up being like Fist of the North Star. And here there was an NES game based on this that we got stateside. And it was interesting because we were getting a lot of stuff imported from Japan. And I want to say, and this is the way I look at it, like anime that I grew up with, the anime that I liked was more adult, teen friendly from the 70s till about the start of the 90s. And I want to say right around the 90s is when it flipped over, when Japan realized, oh crap, we can make money on this. And then they started kidifying the anime. So you have like that period from the 90s to about early 2000s where it's all kitty, chibi, cute stuff, Pokemon, things of that nature. And then I would say within the last maybe 10 years, then that's when you get into all the schoolgirl waifu, senpai stuff. Right. Where it's over-sexualized, girls with big eyes, and, we got a panty shot. And I think that people who are seeing Alita, they're thinking, this is going to be one of those movies where we get to see the girl's ass cheeks the whole way through the film, and they're not realizing, no, this isn't based on, modern anime. Yeah. They have it stereotyped because that's what's popularized now. I mean, you can't go into a comic shop now and find stuff from early anime, but you can find at least 20 million schoolgirl bullshit hanging off the walls and pegs, unless it's something super popular like Dragon Ball.
That's one of the things that, especially when I walk around, or when I got a chance to walk around Otakon, is that there is a sizable chunk of you can't walk inside this booth unless you're over 18. It's I won't say it's a sizable chunk. I want to say it's about 2% of the show, but there is that sizable that chunk. In order to get in here, you have to be 18 or over, and it's like, I know what's behind that curtain. It's not really kid friendly or what would be considered rated R or hard R anime. This is probably closer to the hentai and the tentacle porn stuff that everybody kind of hears about in hushed tones.
Well, here is, and this is my take on it, and you've got to kind of look. Oh, sorry, I don't know why that started like that. Oh crap! Stop. Thank you. Sorry.
That was not good.
Computer's not good. But the thing of it is that when it comes to anime, and again, like I said, there's like a whole revolution. You had like the sci-fi, adult, kind of mature themed stuff from our period, and it wasn't mature themed to be mature themed. It was mature themed because it fit the plot from the 70s to the 90s. And then from the 90s to about, like I said, early 2000s, you had the kiddie stuff, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh!, insert here, you know what I mean? And then after that, it kind of became the adult, hentai stuff. Don't get me wrong, we had hentai back in the 70s through 90s generation. Lots of tentacle crap there. That's all we're going to say about that. But I think what happened is that like a lot of dating and things had changed in Japan, where dating became harder and more complex. One of my friends on YouTube, Bennett the Sage, he did something on this, and so did Gajing Goomba. So if you ever get a chance, I'll send you the link so you can check it out. I'd love to hear your feedback on it, but I'm like, they kind of have a point, because this is what's going on with that crowd over there. I mean, you got people who are marrying their DSs and their imaginary waifus as opposed to going to the club and trying to actually meet somebody. You know what I mean? And I get it, and I'm not trying to shame these people, but I think that's what's kind of evolved the newer generation of anime, and why anime and manga gets the bad rap it has now, if that makes sense. Yeah,
and the culture upon itself has changed over the years with its blooming popularity, and I've said that many times in the past. But before we continue, just to let the folks know, what is Sasha, out of a 10 score, what is Sasha's rating of Alita Battle Angel?
The best way I can put it is I don't often go out to see movies on a release day. I went to see this on release day, and I am highly contemplating going back and watching again to see what all I missed. And that's not a usual thing for me. Because usually when I have to go to the cinema, I've got to deal with all the teenage bull crap and people talking over me. Fortunately, Happy Death Day 2 came out the same day.
Right.
And I was kind of glad because that's where all the teenage crowd went. And I was like, oh, thank God they're not going to see Alita. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I could actually enjoy the movie in quiet. But I'm kind of hoping it stays that way when I go to see this either next weekend or the weekend thereafter. Maybe when I go take my son to go see it. But I would give it a solid. I wouldn't say it's perfect. There are things that I would like to see better. But I would give it about an 8 out of 10, close to a 9. Not perfect, but pretty damn close. Best thing I can tell people is that it does leave you wanting more because of the way the ending's set up. And I don't know if it just reminds me of the OVA kind of ending abruptly like it did. But it definitely does have a punch where you kind of want more.
I think as a independent reviewer, I said it was more of a 7.5 out of 10. What brought it down for me was there were times it seemed way too campy. Just
right.
That's what just irked the hell out of me. And it seemed that this is where James Cameron had his personal touch instead of or toss a lot of notes into, because he didn't write this outright. He had a co-write on this, and I think that was a little bit of his doing, is that he tried to, like, no, we want more romance. We want, Alita to have a connection with Hugo, a real harder connection. Like, no. Granted, this is something that has to be for everybody, a PG-13 movie, but it's slowing the movie down. As a fan, I want to see her kick more ass in some way, shape, or form, and you're just kind of hindering that with this thing. And a lot, I didn't see it too much, but a lot of people thought that the storyline was too bad, too hokey.
I don't know. For me, it's got an interesting twist on it, because you've got, I hate to say it's like classic D&D kind of a setup. You've got a character who has no memory of her past, and she's slowly kind of getting it back. So you get kind of like a fresh slate with the character, but with some history and intrigue as to where she came from and why she's as powerful as she is. But to me, there's a lot there, and it's a lot more meatier than just your normal pulp. Because again, you've got Alita's history that they kind of dip into a little bit, and then you've got the mystery of the floating cities. You have Hugo's background, which you don't really go into a whole lot of detail. Then Ito himself is a very interesting character. I wish they would have dipped a little bit more into Sharon a little bit and got more into her motivations, why she starts out the one movie just at the beginning of the movie so hard against Ito, and then later kind of helps Alita out. I wish they would have kind of explained her change of heart. I felt that would have gave the character some more gravity to her. But again, there's a lot. How can I put it best? There's a lot of meat to this film. And when I go to see something in theaters, and I hate to say this, I expect it to be watered down, because we all know the MPAA. And we all know how studios are.
And
the
not to mention, this is one of the many examples as to a lot of the stuff that was in the original source material that was cut out.
Right. And for me, when I go to see something in cinemas, I usually give it a better review than I would when I finally get to see if there's ever an uncut or extended edition of this. Because I think that there was things that were truncated, but I think they weren't, how can I put it best? I don't think that they weren't filmed. I think they were just left on the cutting room floor. So I'm thinking when this hits DVD and Blu-ray, it's going to have some additional content, may even have an extended cut to it. Because, again, having known James Cameron the way that we all know, and he's a producer, having known Robert Rodriguez, and then on top of that, Guillermo del Toro had his fingers in this, there's no way that this was their original vision. This is the vision after the studio execs watched the version and said, yeah, we need to market this so we can sell it to 13-year-olds. And, oh, yeah, by the way, we got this thing called the MPAA. We want a PG-13 on this. So trim as much as you can. But I guarantee when this hits DVD and Blu, and there's going to be an extended edition. And for now, my like I said, it's kind of like a solid 8, leaning toward a 9, but that's the theatrical cut. Wait for my real judgment when I see the vision as they wanted to give it to us.
I'm hoping that one of the extras on the Blu-ray is the anime, the 2-part anime. That would be awesome to include that. So the new folks who buy this movie that enjoyed it, that were not manga fans or fans of the original anime, have a chance to compare and contrast the movie with the anime.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think it would be an interesting piece. Personally, I hope they have a dub and a sub of the anime on it, and I hope it's a far better dub than what we had back in the 90s.
Yeah, true. I want to say this. I remember, I don't know, call it Mandela effect, call it what have you, but I remember in the dubbed version of Akita, the trio of aged youngsters, I think you know who the characters I'm talking about. When you watch the dubbed version now, they sound more like kids. Just that the chubbier one, if you want to call him that, had more of a Marlon Brando type accent to him.
Yeah, you're right. I've got several different cuts of Akira here at the house. I mean, granted, anime isn't exactly my forte, but I do stick my toes in it on occasion.
Yeah, same here. Yeah, I enjoyed Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. I enjoyed the full original run of Full Metal. There are plenty of animes I have enjoyed in the past, and a few others that I was just like, meh, not for me. One of which was, I won't say meh, but I did enjoy, was Sword Art Online. So,
well, see, I only dip with the older stuff. What was that one? Something Valley of the Wind?
I don't remember that one.
Early Studio Ghibli, before it was Studio Ghibli, and they got those weird bug things in it called alms.
There's a lot of stuff that I don't remember seeing that I probably did see.
Nausicaa, Valley of the Wind. Oh my goodness. Sci-fi, Studio Ghibli, so good. And that was 80s.
Yeah, I didn't really get into anime fully until closer to the mid-90s, early part of the 2000s. So, I might say I'm a late bloomer to the party, so to speak. And there's a lot I enjoyed, but there's still a lot more that I do not enjoy or do not really care for.
I would love to see a live action adaptation, and granted they would have to do both parts, because I don't know what it is. I like the latter sequel more than I do the original one, but both of the Vampire Hunter Ds. I would love to see a live action adaptation done of that.
I will say this, my ex, when I tried to, I won't say get her into anime, but when we were watching, I was like, I'm going to watch an anime tonight, and she... It's like, I want to watch it with you. The one that I picked out of my collection was Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust, the sequel. And she quite enjoyed that one. I said, all right, since you enjoyed that one, we're going to watch the original, the one that kind of helped me get into this genre, tomorrow night. And she turned to me after watching the original and was like, I don't like this one. I like the other one better. I'm like, really? How odd. Vampire Hunter D is what spawned a lot of stuff that you see. Like Akita spawned a lot of stuff that we see nowadays, at least with anime. I think Cinemaska did a kind of a deep dive into Alita in reference to its influences on culture nowadays and throughout anime and video games too.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean it's definitely interesting, and a lot of people I think need to put, how can I put it best, their preconceived notions of what they think anime is. If they want to check out Battle Angel, Alita, just check that shit to the side and watch it just as a straight up sci-fi movie. I mean, that's the best way I can describe it.
Right.
Yes, I can get the whole uncanny valley of Alita's appearance, but if you look at the source material, there's a reason for that, and they're staying true to the source material. Would it have been better if they just used the young lady's actual face? Maybe, but would it have been Battle Angel Alita? Probably not, because...
Oh, you would have had the diehard fans... They would have accepted the actress as she was, but they would have bitched that it wasn't complete. You know how the fan base is. They're almost as bad, if not worse, than comic book fans. If it's 100% accurate, it's too much. If it's not, it's too little. There's no in between ground. I mean, it's pathetic. It's absolutely pathetic, and it's scary.
I'm not disagreeing with you at all on this. I mean, it's definitely interesting, and it's kind of like dealing with Star Wars fans. They're all going to hate no matter what comes out, Let
me put it like this. When I said that, I wasn't looking at the Dragon Ball Z fans with their live action. I wasn't looking at the Ghost in the Shell live action. I was looking at the Street Fighter fans.
Oh my God. Yeah, they're pretty bad.
And out of the three live action movies I know of, there is only one that did a great job. Only one. And it's the one that primarily dealt with Ken and Ryu's training. And that's it.
Okay, I don't remember that one. I mean, I remember the one that had Van Damme in it from the 90s. And then I remember that more recent one that had the Noxeema girl in it, and that was about it.
There was one that came out, I want to say, 5 years ago or so, give or take, that I saw it, I think, on Hulu, of all places, and it focused on, it just focused on Ken's and Ryu's training, and how they learned to do what they do. And come to later that, yes, I think the character's name is Azura. I could be mispronouncing it. And it has their trainer in it, which is, from what I heard, game accurate. Those two characters were game accurate in later Street Fighter games and animes. That aspect was correct. And that's all it focused on, was primarily Ken and Ryu and their training. That's it. And apparently I'm not alone in saying that it's one of the better adaptations, because it just focuses on Ken and Ryu. That's it.
Huh. And this was one of the animes, right? Not a live action movie?
This was a live action.
Okay. Was it one of those, because I know there was a couple, series that were online that I think Hulu originally rebroadcast that might have been from that.
It might have. I don't know. I had, due to fundage issues, I had to suspend both my Netflix and my Hulu accounts for the time being. So.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure, but that sounds honestly like one of those shows that they did online just to be online, if that makes sense, Well,
you gotta figure a lot of stuff when it comes to anime and that culture. A lot of it's direct video on demand. It's not necessarily Hulu or Netflix. To kind of move on, you also want to talk a little bit about the Disney stuff. The live action bullcrap that's been happening, or as a lot of us purists try to tell people, CGI does not make it live action.
Well, Lion King. How many human actors are going to be in that?
None, and still it's CGI, and they're saying, well, it's considered live action because no, it's CGI. They did not use any real lines in it.
Did they film on location? Most likely not.
Right.
You know. The thing of it is to me, I mean, it's one thing with Jungle Book. Jungle Book was live action because Mowgli was human, and there was other humans in those movies. That's fine. Beauty and the Beast, there's a lot of human cast. Even the new Dumbo movie, it looks like some of the characters they made human that's coming out. Because it looks like the little mouse guy isn't a little mouse guy anymore. It's some kid, and they changed some things, and that's fine. But Lion King, no. Lion King to me is not live action. Sorry, no. It's a computer animated movie based on the original animation.
Yeah. Do you think that Disney redoing their movies as live action a money grab, or just an excuse to reboot their movies somehow and get away with it?
Well, it would be one thing if, for example, and I mean, I would love to see Disney actually go back and animate something traditionally. They've found out, because we've reached the point where doing it old school is going to be more costly than just having it done through a computer. And so as a result, people are more, they're more prone to make something computer generated. So I don't foresee them using, animation anytime soon. So I honestly, I mean, I don't want to say it's a cash grab. I will say nostalgia is a big factor, because all the 90 kids are growing up and they want to show their kids what we used to watch growing up. And, I don't think kids are as impressed with animation as we were. Not to say that the original Beauty and the Beast didn't use several CGI shots. Few people remember that. It did. But I think it's just a way of them repackaging something old, and it's a way that they can reissue the original and the remake and make money off of both. It's the reason.
That's the thing. To kind of expand on your point a little bit, if I'm wrong, please tell me. It's the aspect of them going through their back catalogs instead of them coming in and saying, we reopened our vault. Here is Beauty and the Beast, or here is Disney Aladdin, or here is Lion King. They just probably decided, oh, these movies are so cringy and dated. Let's do live action with CGI and the whatnot, and that way we can modernize them, fix any of the cringeworthy stuff that people might not really like and complain about. And that way we could, one, make money and fix those issues.
Right.
And what happens? We get Will Smith as the genie.
It's interesting. Well, I'm not going to pass judgment until I've sat down and watched it. Personally, I think Disney has, like I was talking to you earlier, Disney has enough of a back catalog of original movies that didn't do well, 10, 20 years ago, that they could go back and revisit. And honestly, like I had said to you about them acquiring Fox, there's a lot of animation that Fox did that Disney could definitely grab and rebrand as their own and do the live action remake if that's the way they want to go for it. I mean, hell, Anastasia's not a Disney princess, but she kind of is now. Why not go ahead and get the branding on that?
Now, I know you brought up Titan AE. Nowadays, they could just revamp that. It's like, even though the creatures were, in essence, the evil aliens, if you want to call them that, were primarily CGI, they could just revamp the whole thing as a CGI base. And I won't say release it as a Pixar, release it as either a Fox or Disney film, and it'll probably work out a little bit better and a little bit more polished than it did way back in the day.
Yeah, same way with Treasure Planet, for example. That movie is a good Disney film, and I know a lot of people are like, really? Disney made an animated film called Treasure Planet? And yeah, it existed. And it definitely was an interesting kind of like steampunk retelling of Treasure Island, and it was brilliant. And I could honestly see them do a live action remake of that, and I think it would go over well. It's different. Then you have some other stuff, like we touched on, like really older stuff. Like, how often do you see Black Cauldron like even brought up in Disney's catalog.
Not
They want to
really.
forget
Isn't that. I don't remember that. Wasn't
It
that
was-
like the King Arthur type
No.
of ordeal?
No, that was because you're thinking of the Sword and the Stone, and
Okay.
that gets more respect than the Black Cauldron, because you had the Horned King and this guy looking for the Black Cauldron to raise this army of the dead, and there's this magical pig involved and Princess Eloise. I mean, I think it got crapped on a lot because Disney was trying to make their animation cheap around this time. This was around the time when what was it called, Oscar and Company, where it was kind of like a retelling of Oliver Twist or Oliver and Company with dogs, where they were starting to use the Xerox technique to kind of help them animate. Because, redrawing the same shit over and over again is hard. It's easier just to Xerox, but it makes it kind of look grainy and shitty. And that's where I think a lot of the animation for that movie, because a lot of people are like, this is Disney, it looks really rough, But it's odd, because like I was telling you, that movie came out the same time Legend of Zelda came out on the NES. Similar frickin' themes. You got a young guy who's trying to save a princess. There's a evil king involved, and it's essentially like a Legend of Zelda movie that's based on a huge series of novels, and it did poorly. Whereas the video game, well, we all know that story.
Right. And I know you brought up, what was it? You brought up, not Dungeons and it was that cartoon arcade game.
Oh, Dragon's Lair.
Dragon's Lair. I know it was an actual animation back in the day too, as like a Saturday morning cartoon. But I think it's one of those things that could possibly come back as if not a live action, a CG type movie, or I think it could be also reissued as a video game, not as an anime, but something a little bit more interactive too. If not, hey Netflix, Bandersnatch much? So,
well, Don Bluth has forever been trying to get a movie going on that, and when it comes to animation, I mean, Don Bluth is up there. I was more of a Bakshi kid. But Bluth definitely had an influence in my life, and it's just odd because I can't even think of the last movie that Bluth was even involved in outside of the All Dogs Go to Heaven and what was it called? Those dinosaurs, Land Before Time.
right.
Outside of that, I can't think of anything Bluth did after that, or at least anything that was major that came after those movies. I mean, he did Anastasia, which we touched on. And that was 97, but I don't think he's done anything recently outside of that.
Yeah.
He was involved with Titan AE, now that I'm looking at it. But to be honest, nobody's done anything with Dragon's Lair, and it's interesting because it was recently on Stranger Things, their last season, it was brought up. But come on, everybody remembers Princess Daphne,
Yeah.
Everybody wanted to get to see her.
And not to mention, everybody, folks our age kind of remembers more so the animated version of Princess Zelda and the whole aspect of that particular anime. I won't say anime, but that particular cartoon and the whole aspect of, excuse me.
Yeah. And what trips me out is that video game was like early Laserdisc technology, and it just blew our mind. I mean, it was essentially an FMV movie where we had to click on the right option to move the story along, and depending on what option we picked, it was either going to give us a death animation or it was going to lead us into another chapter of the story. And it was always randomized because that damn thing was a quarter muncher. It was up there with because it did have a sequel. I think there was a Dragon's Lair 2, if I'm not mistaken.
And also there was a kind of a sci-fi version too. It was Captain something or other. I forgot what it was.
Yeah, where he kind of becomes like a teenager and is all kind of dorky, and then after that, Space Ace.
Right. That was it. Space Ace was the sci-fi version of it. But for me, what ate most of my quarters as a kid was Gauntlet.
Oh yes, and see with like gaming in and of itself, I mean, like I said, during that generation, there was a lot of really good games that caught our eye, and I think a lot of animation, because we were interested in new technology, kind of fell through the cracks. And granted, I won't lie, Black Cauldron is a little rough when it comes to the animation and the story, but there's a whole series of novels that thing was based on, and it was based on like Celtic legend, which definitely is very rich, and we haven't really seen too much in cinema. So I think, honestly, if Disney wants to do all of these live-action remakes, why not Black Cauldron? You could turn that shit into a trilogy. Like I said, there's a whole series of books out there.
Right. But,
it just seems like a missed opportunity.
As you stated, you were an Army brat. I want to see if you remember this particular game, because I remember seeing it on my few occasions hitting Atlantic City with my folks and being stuck in their arcade. Have you ever seen the holographic arcade game? I forgot the title of his name, but it was pretty much a quasi holographic game, arcade game.
Yes, it was a big giant ass cabinet. I remember that much. And they were huge. And they had a couple on some of the bases that we were at, because when you lived on base, it was pretty cool, because usually base had its own movie theater. And it was always interesting because you always knew somebody who worked at the movie theater, because they only hired like other fellow Army brats to work there, because it kind of gave us jobs while we were stuck on base, be it, overseas or in the States. And so we always knew somebody who could let us into the movies for free and whatnot. But the big takeaway on those bases were the bowling alley. And a lot of people were like, why the bowling alley? Bowling alley had the best arcade. And all of the military bases had a bowling alley, and oh my goodness, they always had the best of the best of the best arcades out there. And I do remember that one. They had the hologram one. I can't remember the game precisely.
Right.
Because I was more stuck on playing a lot of that Mad Dog McCree a lot. And that game was horrible, but it ate quarters.
And the thing is, this was a time where I remember that particular game was like $2 a pop or $1 a pop, back when games were still either a quarter or at most 50 cents a pop. This was a game that was a buck a pop, and it was like, oh my god, I can't spend like $5-10 on this particular game. I'm going to toss my quarters on like something like Streets of Rage or something the equivalent of that.
Final Fight.
Final Fight was the big one at the time. I just couldn't think of the name. Or and at the time, X-Men and...
Later on in our high school days, it would have been the X-Men, like 4-player, not the 2-player, because the 2-player sucked, but the 4-player that had the big stretch screen
right
for X-Men, and then they also had the Captain America version of that with the Avengers. But I always loved AVP with the because that was out around the same time Sega CD had launched, because it had like the CD sound on it.
Right.
And that was done by Capcom, and that was so good. That was one of those few games with X-Men, Captain America, and the Avengers, and AVP. Those 3 games should have gotten some sort of home port. Yes, there were games that had the titles, but they were not the same games as the arcade games.
I just remember that one time at the arcade at that particular casino, just at because you can't walk on the floor when you're under 18, or go into a lot of places being under 18 in the casino. It's so the best place to hang out was the arcade, and I remember playing. I think they had the particular casino had Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the big 4-player one.
Yes.
We got so close to the end, and it was like, we're closing up, you gotta go now. Like, we're like a hair away from the end, we're like not even a half a stage away from the last boss, and it's like, really? Yeah, you gotta walk away from the machine, we gotta lock up. I'm like, oh, can't you just let us complete the game? Please, we want to see this out. Now we gotta lock up. Like, oh, you bastard.
It happens. You remember? Very few people remember this one, but like when I was working at the movie theater here in Chambersburg, way in the upper upper end of the 90s. It was the Southgate one before it got knocked down. They put a drugstore in its place. But they actually had, I loved Bust a Move, because that was something we used to drop quarters on all the time. The little puzzler where you shoot the little balls up, kind of like Reverse of Tetris, where you match up the colors. But they had that. I played that because I was addicted to that. I could go pretty far on a couple quarters with that. But they also had the Aliens arcade game that was based on just the original movie Aliens, which was done by Konami, which was weird because it was like, this is like Contra, but Aliens, kind of like how Contra was Aliens, but Contra.
I'll go one better. And campier. The Aerosmith game.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Oh, what was that called? It had a weird name.
True. And the thing is, the Terminator 2 game was similar to it as well.
Yes. Yes, I remember the Terminator.
And the thing is, no matter how hard I tried, I could not beat... I could beat or get to the end of Terminator 2 game, that standing arcade game, but I could not beat it by myself, number one. Number two, no matter how much I tried to get the good ending, I couldn't get the good ending on that. Because you had to, in essence, blow up the whole of Cyberdyne, and there was no way you could have done that single player wise. At least that I know of, or at least every time I tried.
Yeah. Yeah, they had some good games back in the day. And it's just sad you don't see too many decent arcades around anymore. This past,
it's all claw machines and Dance Dance Revolution stuff.
Well, I thought it was funny because yesterday, before we went to go see Battle Angel Alita, like the boyfriend had said to me, he's like, "Hey, let's go stop at this place down in Chambersburg called Nirvana. They've got an arcade in the back." And I'm like, "Okay," because I live in Chambersburg. I'm shocked that this somehow bypassed my radar. We get there, and then I figure out why. It was on a side street. Like, it's advertised like it's right on Main Street, but it's not. You got to go down an alley and park in the back, and you can barely see where the store is. It doesn't have, like, a storefront. Right. And the front part of the store is, basic geek stuff. And they had some cool stuff in there, don't get me wrong. I'm not giving them a negative judgment, because we'll probably run into them at the local Comic-Con, because they were advertising that recently. But it was funny because the whole time we're in there, the boyfriend's like, "I swear they had an arcade." And it was funny because I walked past this little tiny room, and I'm like, "Yeah, I just walked past it." And he's like, "How did I miss it?" And then he sticks his head in, and he's like, "You've got to be kidding me. They say this is a full arcade." They had maybe 5 cabinets. But most of those cabinets were not official cabinets. They were like clone cabinets where it was like a MAME or multi-arcade system running inside of it. And then they advertised the fact that we've got original Nintendo games. And I'm dying of laughter because he's like, "Oh, they've got a mini NES." And I'm like, "No, honey, that ain't a mini NES. They actually had a Cool Baby, and they were advertising it as a mini NES." And I'm like, "I gotta leave." You know what the Cool Baby is, right?
It's let me guess. It has like all the ROMs on it or something like that.
It's got ROMs on it, but most of them are ROM hacks. If you want to play that Jackie Chan video game with Jackie Chan wearing a giant Mario head, it's gonna be your cup of tea. It's bad, but I'm just sitting there like, yeah, you don't advertise you have an arcade, like half your stuff is emulated. I was expecting, if you're gonna brag that you have an arcade, yes, having 4 or 5 cabinets impressive, but it's more impressive if they're all original, and like one of them at least has to be a Street Fighter of some type. You know what I mean?
Let me put it like this: where Matt had, again, I'm not folks at home, I'm not knocking Matt, nor ever will. Where he had last year's punk rock flea market, they had a better, or I say a more elaborate arcade than what you're telling me about this place has.
Yes. Exactly. And it's just funny. And I'm not knocking them. I mean, granted, it's a small business in Chambersburg. I mean, we've got, which I think is kind of shocking, we have the comic shop that runs the local, like, cons. You got John's Comic Shop, Comics World. Then you have All Fun and Games downtown, which is just basically a store for your D&D, Magic, and shit of that nature. And now you have Nirvana, which kind of dips into both of those. And I'm like, yes, Chambersburg's a pretty big town, but I don't see how a business, even though it's right downtown, that's on a side street, kind of like hidden off to the side, is going to do well when you've got those two businesses. The one's right beside Walmart now, Comics World is, and then the other one, the one where it's all like, you know, pen and pencil board games and Dungeons and Dragons, is like right at the point of 11 where 11 goes north and south. You know what I mean? So those guys have got locations, whereas this place doesn't really, and their advertising is hilarious to say the least. And it's like, you can't really say you have an arcade if it's pretty much all emulation, and half of the ones that you do have there are not running currently. So
that's one of the things I'm happy to see, is that even though they're probably emulated, is the one-up machines, as small and tiny as they are, at least they're available and cheap enough for someone like us, if I had the cash and space for it, to pick up one and, you know, kind of say they have an arcade machine in the house.
Well, I wouldn't say that they're emulated so much. I mean, they are an emulation, but, like, for example, the Pac-Man one is a straight-up emulation, and it's a 100% clone of the original ROM that the arcade ran off of. Because granted, I'm not a perfect Pac-Man player, but you can get the, 253 level error, where the game just goes completely bonkers because it's not expecting anybody to go that high. And it also has the dead zones where you can just have Pac-Man chill in the middle of the maze and the ghost won't touch him. I mean, it's emulating the original ROMs. They did not go cheap. They actually have the official licenses from those companies to have those ROMs on those machines.
Either way, it is cool and something to have in the house, but I won't have right now because I don't have this room and I don't have the cash. So,
well, to me, it's if I was going to have one in the house, don't get me wrong, I would build a MAME emulator and just have a multi-arcade emulator in there and just build my own, like, cocktail table, because that way you can get one and you can just sock a fairly cheap computer in there, especially if you're only running, like, 80s and 90s games in it. You don't need that much hard drive space. And, again, I mean, it's a cheap alternative, but for a business claiming that they have an arcade to be running emulators, it's kind of like, you know what I mean? It's like, no. Have a couple real
I
cats.
want to say this, to give my buddy some credit, because at the I want to say at the time he owned it, him and his family owned the building. I'm not going to mention names to keep it out, keep them out of everything. Is he owned this big apartment complex in one of the towns I used to live in, and they had on the bottom part, yes, it was kind of it was a multi-use type building. It was maybe some businesses on the ground floor and apartments on the top. And one of the businesses on the floor that him and his family didn't rent out, but they had a laundromat in it. And granted, it was just for the laundromat. You can't fault them for having it. It was one of these multi-game arcade machines that had like Street Fighter, Galaga, and a couple other stuff like that. And you pop in a quarter, you could have some fun while you're doing laundry. That I'm not going to knock. That I won't knock.
I remember when I was a kid, there was this laundromat, and I don't know how to describe it, but they had this arcade game, and for the life of me, I've been trying to figure out what it was. And it was the weirdest arcade game I'd ever seen. But you basically played as like a paint roller. Okay? And there's like different paths that you have to take, kind of like a Pac-Man kind of maze setup. But there's different things, and your job is to try to paint all of the paths. But there's things that'll walk across your path, or there's things that'll try to kill you while you're trying to do the painting. Like there are these fish that I remember that you could run over with the roller. But the problem is that they'd pop up and then ruin wherever you left off at after you ran them over. if you didn't finish the maze in time. But I would love to figure out what that game was called, because it was weird. And it was definitely like late 80s. But it was a Pac-Man clone, but it was official somehow.
Oh.
And I can't think of it.
Yeah, the weird stuff that we played in arcades or in some way, shape, or form. But
yeah, I've done searches for it. And I'm like, paint roller game, fish, weird feet. Nothing pops up.
Have you tried Pac-Man clone?
I need to try that. There's tons of Pac-Man clones. I mean, hell, again, being a military brat, we traveled a good bit, and I had access to systems that people, when I came back stateside, was like, what the hell's this? You know, because I had, and granted, this will blow people's mind, because most people over here are used to saying ZX Spectrum. I knew a lot of Brits. It was ZX Spectrum to me. And a lot of those games where you either had to key in the code to get the game running, or you had a tape, like an actual like tape that you'd put in a tape player to load the game. And trust me, most of that sitting around waiting for the game to load was interesting. But there was a lot of interesting games that never came stateside. There was like a Running Man game that was based on the Running Man that was on the ZX Spectrum, and it was good. You know, the Running Man, Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Right.
Yeah, so it's interesting.
On that note, I hate to cut things short, Sasha, but I have one to use the bathroom. I'm going to say I have to use the restroom, and I have some editing to do to release this week's episode. So I do appreciate you being on the show again. We have to do this a little bit more often, every now and again.
Well, I've been busy with episodes, but yeah, we can fit something in. We'll do something soon. Are you going to be at Con this spring?
Hopefully.
Okay. I'm going to be there with, what does George call that business? Panda Designs or what have you?
Something like that. And I think he has a few pins that I might want to pick up too.
Okay. All right. Well, I might have some stuff for sale there as well, along with like the Princess of Darkness DVDs. And if I can get this Etsy seller I'm working with on patches. And trust me, I'm going to have some patches that might anger up some blood, but that's okay. I like it. Because it wouldn't be me if I didn't have them.
Right, and as always, the links to your YouTube channel and probably your fan page on Facebook will be linked in the show description as always.
All right, well, I'll catch you guys later. You guys keep creep it real and take scare.
We'll be right back with more of the Long Coat Mafia podcast.
Welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed those bumpers that George Spike Reel provided for us when he did the whole kit and caboodle stuff this year, and I think it was like 2 years ago. With this episode, it's only appropriate to use those bumpers that he graciously did for us. And granted, this is the end of the show, and I hope you enjoyed the Skype call with Sasha, the Princess of Darkness herself. Again, her links will be in the usual spot. And for all of you out there, again, our Facebook page, as always, is facebook.com/The Long Coat Mafia Podcast. While you're there, hit that like button and stay tuned to that page, because we post up little news clips during the week, and sometimes our Facebook page is the home to exclusive Facebook videos, because that video could get dinged on YouTube or might not be fully YouTube appropriate, so we will put it on Facebook and hope it doesn't get dinged there. And we're also on Twitter and Instagram. Our handles for both are pretty much the same thing, and that is Long Coat Mafia. And if you wish to join in the conversation, you could always email us at longcoatmafia@gmail.com. Plus, you could direct message us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and we will read your messages on the air. So, and we've done that before. We've read comments on the air, messages on the air, emails on the air. We will do that. And I promise you, if we get a lot of it, we will have a email and message only show. Trust me on that. We haven't gotten that far yet, but if that ever happens, that will happen. Not to mention, if we get stuff sent into the show, we will open it through a video, and that video will more than likely be posted up on YouTube. And our YouTube channel, we don't have a direct name for it or URL for it, so you have to go into YouTube and search The Long Coat Mafia Podcast for it, and while you're there, hit subscribe and hit that notification button, because that's how the algorithms work right now. So go there, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification button, because we will be putting exclusive YouTube videos up, or timed exclusives up on YouTube. So go there, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification button. If you watch a video or listen to the episodes on our YouTube channel, please hit that like button so YouTube knows that we are actually being watched by you, I should say, and you guys are liking what we are putting out. What else? We do have a Mixer.com channel, or Mixer is kind of, for those of you not familiar with Mixer, because a lot of you are more familiar with Twitch than Mixer. Mixer is kind of Microsoft's answer to Twitch. So our channel on Mixer is mixer.com/LCMP, and the letters are capitalized. So I'm talking capital L, capital M, capital, I'm giving you the wrong information there. It's capital L, capital M, capital C. No, wait, I was right the first time. It is the Long Coat Mafia Podcast, and it's Mixer.com LCMP. It's capital L, capital C, capital M, and capital P. And that is so they don't toss us off Mixer. And though I haven't for the past couple of days or a week or two been streaming Borderlands or Borderlands 2, I should get back into streaming. But I recently picked up Final Fantasy IX on Xbox Live, and I'll hopefully start streaming that instead of go between Final Fantasy and Borderlands. Plus, within the next week or two, I'll be picking up Crackdown 3 and what is it? It's on tip of my tongue. It is Kingdom Hearts 3. Hopefully, I'll work each one of those games into rotation, so all of you out there could watch me suck at gaming. Hopefully, I'll be also. Who knows? I might also stream Black Ops 4 or World War II. If I'm so inclined, I'll reinstall it and play. But I know I should be playing Red Dead Redemption. I have it. I haven't gotten that far in it. I should be playing it, but I haven't. But excuse me. What else I'm forgetting? The YouTube, Mixer, our email, our Twitter, our Instagram, our Facebook page. I know I'm forgetting something. But either way, if I am, all our social media links will be in the description in its usual spot. So, oh yes, I know what I'm forgetting. If you're listening to us on a mobile device and you'd rather listen to us via a desktop or a laptop computer, you could find us on iTunes as usual and subscribe to us there, so you can get the episodes immediately as soon as they're pretty much posted up. But if iTunes goes funky and all that, like it tends to do, you could find us on Stitcher and Spotify. Plus, you could find us on our main site, which you heard me talking about early in this program, which is, again, thelongcoatmafia.podbean.com. And you could hear all our episodes, the beta episodes, our very first episode, and everything beyond that up until this episode. Plus, if you're listening to us via a a desktop or a laptop computer and you wish to go mobile, you could find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, the Podbean app, which I recommend because I think the Podbean app goes all the way back to our beta episodes. Plus, we're on the Stitch Radio app, the Spotify app, plus where podcasts are found, if I'm not naming the one that you particularly use. So, listen to us. If you're listening to us through streaming on our main website, give us a like, and if you want to give us a comment. If you follow us on social media, please share our videos, share our posts, share our episode posts as well. And that way more people get to share our episodes. I can't beg all of you enough. Because if our episodes share, we don't have to necessarily play to win on Facebook and Twitter. It helps us get the word out. Please do so, and I thank you, all of you, for doing so. The more you share, the more the word of our shows gets out, and the more people that listen. Trust me, I know it works because, again, Daniel Benoit did it for his episode, and that his episode did way better than the past couple episodes that we've been having. So please do so. Share the crap out of our posts. It does benefit us. Like our stuff, share it. It helps us in the algorithms. And if you're listening to us via iTunes or Apple Podcasts, or if Google Podcasts allows, leave us a rating and comment. And maybe maybe next episode, I should have done it for this. I'll do it for next episodes. Those of you listened this far, please remind me to do it for next week's episode. And that is read our reviews that are on iTunes, because we have like 10 or 11 reviews on iTunes. All of them are 5-star. And so please do so. Again, thank you for sticking with us this far, and I'll catch all of you next episode. Thank you. Good night or good day.
You've been listening to the Longcoat Mafia Podcast, the internet's most hated and mafia-themed geek podcast.